Welcome again, everybody, to Second Saturday Tarot, where we're doing our deep dive into Tarot, the Tree of Life, Kabbalah or Kabbalah, depending on who we're talking with, one being English and one being Hebrew for the Kabbalah. Okay, so here we go. The Astral Triangle is what we're going into today. And here on the title slide, what we're seeing is the sun, the star, and a glimpse of the tower. Okay, next slide. So here is the astral triangle, spheres 7, 8, and 9 coming down near the bottom of the tree of life, Netzach Hod Yesod. Okay, so we'll go a little further with that today and a little further with those three connecting paths. Okay, and next slide. The three connecting paths are the sun, the tower, and the star. So we've been into the tower pretty deeply, and today we're going to go into the sun and the star, not as deeply as we will ultimately, but we're going to touch in and see how this all fits together and why. Okay, next slide. Here's another view of the astral triangle, 7, 8, and 9. So between the 7 and 8, we have a stretched view of the tower card. And this card is going to go both ways on the astral triangle of the tree of life. Then between the 7 and 9, we have the stretched version of the star, which will also be going both ways between the 7 and the 9. And then between the 8 and the 9, we have the path of the sun, which also goes both ways. So all of these, the 7, 8, and 9, the tower, star, and sun, comprise the astral triangle. Okay, next slide. Astral. Now here's where it starts to get really interesting. Okay, what is astral? Oh, so here's from the dictionary, 1605, the beginning of this terminology. It's from Latin, australis, astrum, star, from the Greek, astron, star. Okay, what does it mean? Of, relating to, or coming from the stars. A super sensible substance held in theosophy to be next above the tangible world in refinement. And then the third definition is visionary or elevated in station of power. Okay, next slide. Enter. I know many of you are going to laugh because you have studied our wonderful Madame Blavatsky. Madame Blavatsky is the queen of the astral world. She is the one who went so deep into the meaning of astral. So here are her dates, 1831 to 1891. She was born in Russia. She died in London. She lived in New York. That was where she founded the Theosophical Society. And she spent a lot of time in Tibet and traveling around in India, which is where she got a lot of ideas that she brought back to the Western world. She wasn't the only one. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to pick out some characters who put information together, not the totality of it, just some people out of history. And then you can research it because there's a lot more to know. So she created the Theosophical Society in 1650, and this is teachings, 1850, that's a typo, 1850. Teachings about the cosmos, which embrace mystical insight, and it was called Western esotericism. She co-founded the Theosophical Society, and she wrote The Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled, among other writings, but these are two of her most prominent writings. Here she talked about, in Isis Unveiled, she talked about astral atmosphere, a living, conductive universal medium. Okay, this is the atmosphere that surrounds us and it's some kind of conductive medium and it's alive. Okay, then the astral body, our body as a living, conductive, universal medium. Astral fluid. Astral fluid is something that we can call up and surround ourselves with it. Like when you hear the expression surrounding yourself with white light or something like that, we can surround ourselves with astral fluid for protection. Like making a wall around ourselves. Astral light can be projected and directed at will. And this has also been called the Spirit of God. Okay, in terms of projecting and directing at will, this is related to the next one, astral currents, currents that travel for good or ill through the airwaves, so to speak, and those can be healing transmissions. So this has to do with laying on of hands, making astral transmissions of this astral energy. And this is the energy that is, quote, from the stars. So it was related to, has always been related to the idea of astrology, because the universe is seen mystically here, Western esotericism, it is seen as a living medium in and of itself. So this would apply not only to dark matter, but to luminous matter. So she brought together a lot of these teachings, a lot of these insights, and dovetailed and matched Eastern knowledge with Western knowledge, and came up with a lot of ideas that really rolled things forward that had to do with both science and mysticism. So I wanted to start out with her because she was so big on the astral world and bring her into, in a certain sense, the astral triangle. Okay, because the astral triangle has to do with all this, the atmosphere, the body, the fluid, the light, the astral medium. Okay, next slide. Astral, ether. This is Madame Blavatsky's really big word, ether, which she spelled E-T-H-E-R, but it's spelled all different ways. You know, astral, ether, the akasha, those are all interchangeable. Soul, interchangeable. Spirit, interchangeable. Soul or spirit of the cosmos. The soul of the world. Soul of the world. Anima means soul. Mundi means world. That's from Hinduism. Soul of the world, or the logos, it's also called in Western mysticism. This is a living medium, a living universe. Life itself is a living universe or living cosmos. That's what the astral triangle is about. Okay, next slide. Eliphas Levi, Kabbalist, Paris, 1810 to 1875, the dogma and ritual of high magic. So Madame Blavatsky learned a lot, was influenced by Eliphas Levi, who believed that the astral atmosphere or astral plane is a law of reciprocal influences between the planets and their combined effect upon mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdoms as well as ourselves. Okay, everything is charged, everything is alive, and everything is interrelated. And this astral atmosphere that we live in and that lives within us, Levi said, changes with every breath. So it's always moving. Okay, next slide. Eliphas Levi was influenced by Paracelsus, 1493 to 1541. So I'm just going back in a little bit historically. Paracelsus was a German Swiss physician and alchemist, and he taught that every man, animal, and plant bears external and internal evidences of the influences dominant during germinal development. Not only during germinal development, but ever on after. Nothing at all in the universe is unimportant. Every single event, however minor, affects the whole universe. Everything in the universe is interconnected. So 1493 to 1541, many people were following Paracelsus, and this became widely known philosophically, what he was talking about. So he was in Europe at the time, just to keep in mind. Okay, next slide. Paracelsus, back to Paracelsus, a physician, alchemist, lay theologian, astrologer, and philosopher. This was not unusual, of course, in those days. I mean, becoming a physician was a different thing, and it was developing. The AMA did not exist yet. Okay, so everything is developing. He created a new philosophy of medicine, and this is during the Renaissance when so much was breaking out and breaking forward. He believed that science and religion are inseparable. Scientific messages, he said, are direct messages from God. Medicine is a divine mission. So, and Madame Blavatsky would have said, scientific messages are direct messages that come through the astral plane. That's probably how she would have put it. He believed solid academic research is necessary for curing, and he wasn't alone in this. He was one of the first people, though, who was really insisting on this. And for example, in chemistry, he said, for example, sulfur, mercury, and salt are poisons, for example, and plants are curative in general. And faith and devotion matter. So all of that is important. The science is important. The faith and devotion that it's going to work is important. And knowing what kills and what heals. And he built on the four elements of the Greeks: fire, water, air, and earth. And of course, this goes back, these four elements go back worldwide. These are the worldwide four elements, the shamanic elements, if you will, fire, water, air, and earth, that appear in every culture around the world, according to Mircea Eliade, maybe the foremost researcher, academician on shamanism. Okay, so that was part of it too. What is the meaning of fire, water, air, and earth, and how do they move together? Paracelsus believed in the idea of macrocosm and microcosm, which is what that is supposed to say. Macrocosm and microcosm and harmony. Okay, this macrocosm, microcosm thing is really important because we live in a macrocosmic world, and I am a microcosm within the macrocosm. So that's really important. Every individual being is a microcosm of the macrocosm, and that can all work together harmoniously. It's possible. Paracelsus was instrumental in this medical revolution. He was one of the people who came up with the idea of germ theory, and germ theory meant that diseases within the body could actually be independent. It could actually be like the body is invaded by some kind of germ that has a life of its own. And he also came up with this idea of toxicology, or was instrumental there too. And toxicology has to do with dose response. So that is, you could maybe kill these germs, for example, with some other kind of medicine, some kind of chemistry. Okay, so this started to become an issue with immunizations, which is really interesting. Very shortly thereafter, it became a huge argument whether one should, actually it was during smallpox was the really big one, whether one should have a dose of something to keep something else at bay. I mean, this is a big issue right now, and it was a big issue then, and it remained a big issue about whether this is in divine order or not. Okay, so also Paracelsus was a forerunner of antisepsis and the idea of psychosomatic illness. So he talked a lot about the role of imagination in our consciousness, in our mind. How do we impact illness? Okay, next slide. And here comes then Cotton Mather. Okay, Cotton Mather, he was American, he was in the colonies, he was in Boston, a philosopher and a scientist. So his dates are 1663 to 1728. Cotton's father, whose name was Increase Mather, Cotton's father came from England. He was a Puritan clergyman. He was born in Massachusetts Bay Colony. That's right, it was his father. In 1639, Increase became the president of Harvard College, and he was president from 1681 to 1701. So this is Cotton's father, and he had a really strong impact because what they were talking about at Harvard, which they believed Americans should be well educated, these new people who were settling. And now we're talking 1663, Cotton Mather was born. Well, remember that the first Puritans landed at Plymouth Rock in 1620, and then Increase was born in 1639, so he was actually second generation. His father came. He was born in 1639, and then Cotton was born in 1663. So Cotton would be third generation on, quote, in the New World, American soil or whatever. Okay, and what these first early people did was they immediately founded Harvard because they were going along with the ideas of Paracelsus that education was really important and science was really important. But Harvard was a divinity school, and that wasn't separated out because medicine had everything to do with divinity and God, and healing was about divinity and God. And they were the Puritans were, they left Europe because a lot of them felt that religion was out of hand in Europe, that it was way too celebratory, way too broad, and they wanted to narrow it. They wanted it to be much more austere. And so that's what they were bringing forward in the New World. But they really believed in science. They really believed in science, and they did believe in God. Okay, so Cotton also believed in mysticism big time. He wrote a lot of books. He was extremely influential. He wrote Wonders of the Invisible World, which is a very important book. In Wonders of the Invisible World, which he wrote during the time of the Salem witch trials, he interviewed a lot of the witches. He spent time with them. He watched them do mysterious things like levitate. He saw it with his own eyes, and he was a man of science. And he also witnessed how healing and illness could be created at a distance. And this is part of what the witches were doing, theoretically. Or this is what the issue was, that they could curse somebody at a distance and something would happen to that person. Or they could use a doll and poke pins in it or something like that. And then that person would suffer. Okay, and so the puritanical idea was that if these powers don't flow from God, okay, the powers exist, they exist. But if they don't flow from God, they must be of Satan. Satan. And so that was where the conflict was, because it became very polarized. Either, it was black and white. If they weren't from God, they were from Satan. And so Harvard actually had a series of conferences on the subject to try to figure it out, where all the best known clergymen and divinity people came together to discuss this. And Cotton himself became a key witness in the Salem witch trials. Okay, so next slide. Okay, Salem witch trials. So the Salem witch trials, these are some of the issues that came up in the Salem witch trials. The idea of expanded consciousness, astral energies. Astral means travel, that thoughts can travel, that healing currents can travel. All those things that Madame Blavatsky talked about. Apparitions can travel. Apparitions are a person's body could travel, astral travel. You could travel, but your body could actually appear someplace. You could be sitting in your library, or in your room or something like that, but your body can actually appear somewhere else. That's an apparition. Remote viewing. That a witch, we'll talk about a witch, that a witch could travel, go into somebody else's house and remotely view that house, and the people inside that house could see the witch remotely viewing the house. She would be there. They would see her like a ghost. So that was part of it, part of the issue. Sympathetic magic, that's the one where you could poke pins in a doll, and the doll would represent somebody, and then that person would be hurt by this poking of pins or whatever. Fortune telling was a big issue. So people were telling fortunes, they were reading cards. And there was another issue, and the issue was what you think or desire can become. Anything we think can actually happen. Then it also raises the issue, who has the right to practice any of this? By whose authority? And so it has to come through God. Okay, what's the reference going to be? Well, in this particular case, the reference was going to be the Bible. And here you have to keep in mind that the Bible had been written and rewritten and rewritten. And right now it was being rewritten maybe 80 different times, like in New England. But the one that they were going by was called the Geneva Bible. And that one kept getting updated. So it's the Geneva Bible. And then who has the power to upend the puritanical social order? Because that's what people were afraid of, that these witches who had a consciousness that was outside of the puritanical order, that they could ruin the puritanical society that people were trying to form. Okay, so just a couple other notes on the Salem witch trials. I'm working on a book on the Salem witch trials. Don't know if I'll ever finish it, but I'm deeply involved in this. Okay, my ancestors were very involved in the Salem witch trials. They were the Herricks. They were the constables who arrested the witches. They weren't the witches. They were the constables. They were, one of them was on the jury condemning the witches. One of the juries, they had several juries, but on the juries, and they were in positions of authority, as Puritans saying that these witches had to go. Okay, and one note that I'm going to put in here is that at the end of the witch trials, and this is something that you don't hear about very often, after 20 people had been basically hanged for witchcraft, after it was all done, and these were just members of the town, the entire jury put out a declaration of regret saying, actually, we don't understand what we were talking about, and we should never have condemned these people because what they were talking about was something bigger than we could understand. So that's called the Declaration of Regret. And so I'm tapped into that. I'm personally tapped into that because consciousness is really big and we don't even know what the limitations of it are or how we can work with it and what it even means. Okay, so next slide. One other note on those witches, by the way, those witches were not first generation. Okay, those witch trials took place in 1692 to 1693. Those are the dates of the witch trials. They were, just as Cotton Mather was third generation on the land, his grandfather was the one who had come. The second generation on the land and into the third generation, the kids started rebelling against their parents. Okay, and they weren't going to be as puritanical as their parents. Some of them left. A lot of people left. They went, some of my ancestors went to Connecticut where things were more open, started moving away from the Boston area where things were very tight. That's where the Salem witch trials took place, and these professors from Harvard were pretty conservative, and they were that was Boston, and they were judging, in terms of what was going on in these Salem witch trials. Okay, so now we're going to go up to Benjamin Franklin. Okay, so we're taking a little leap through some pieces of American history here. Benjamin Franklin, 1706. Okay, so the witch trials were 1692 to 93. And now we're leaping forward to 1706. So here comes Benjamin Franklin. Well, we've all heard of Benjamin Franklin, an author, printer, political theorist, scientist, diplomat, founding father, and Freemason. Benjamin was one of the maybe softly rebellious ones. His father was a Puritan, and Cotton Mather was a very good friend of the family. He was his father's friend, and Benjamin's father had Cotton's books. The essence of Cotton's books, even though he was very conservative Puritan, we are more than we think we are. We are not limited, and invisible wonders do exist. Just raising the question. Benjamin Franklin believed he believed in that, he believed in the idea we are more than we think we are. And he also believed we need to get away from the narrow evangelical puritanical path because it is not helping us in our thinking. Okay, Benjamin becomes a Freemason. Freemasonry is starting to take hold throughout Europe and the New World. And the essence of Freemasonry was, as we think, so we can become. So people are looking at these questions of what is consciousness. The idea was develop the intuitive and rational mind and enlighten the self. We can do this if we think about it, Benjamin was saying. what happens here, and here's where it gets really edgy, is the definition of God begins to change. Going from the overseeing, punitive God to the God of ethics. Benjamin Franklin develops 13 virtues to live by. And these are the virtues: temperance, silence, order, resolution, frugality, industry, sincerity, justice, moderation, cleanliness, tranquility, chastity, and humility. And what Benjamin did in his own life was he worked one of these virtues each week. So he worked with the virtues time after time after time and really brought this forward in American life. And I think it's interesting that he attended to the God of ethics, and he made a big leap because his father was a Puritan. So it's the God of ethics and 13 virtues. 13 virtues, 13 colonies, 13 stars on the flag. There are 13 arrows, I think it is, on the dollar bill. I have to look. But and then the dollar bill, by the way, I won't talk about that today, but another time. Just look at the dollar bill. Benjamin Franklin was instrumental in creating some of the symbology. So the God of ethics becomes central in Freemasonry and in the development of this idea of, quote, American values, and then in holding together both the American and French revolutions. First, there was an American Revolution, and that was against the monarchy and against the divine right of kings, because now they're saying, wait, ethics, we all have ethics that we can live by. So what they did is they took all of the material from the Salem witch trials, did not get rid of the idea of consciousness is way bigger than we think, but really introduced strong ethics. Okay, and so these ethics also appear in the Tree of Life as we know it today. Then the eye that sees all, this eye seeing all, which does appear on the dollar bill and the top of the Tree of Life, turns out, as they're saying, not only exists outside the self as, quote, God, but also within the self as a reflection. And then that shows up in the power of ethics. Okay, so, all right, next slide. Okay, now we have George Washington. So Benjamin Franklin, he was born in 1706. So George Washington is essentially the next generation coming in, 1732 to 1799. So he's the first president of the United States. He's a master mason. He's the Grand Master of the Lodge in Alexandria, Virginia, which I love the names of these towns, you know, Alexandria, Virginia. Okay, well, Alexandria, Egypt was where all of the ideas came together and then flourished. All right, so now we have Alexandria, Virginia. So George Washington believes in a divine power who watches over the battlefield, protects life, and is involved in the outcome of war. He refers to this power as creator, divine author, or supreme being, not usually using the word God. He avoids evangelical Christianity, he too moving away from Puritanism. He emphasizes religious toleration. This is a quote from him, being no bigot myself to any mode of worship. Okay, again, you know, when I say this has to do with the Salem witch trials, I'm inferring that because that was such a big issue that happened that it made people begin to think about this for many generations after. George Washington believes in the new Enlightenment principles of rationality, reason, and brotherhood. Okay, so this is very Masonic, and now this is what the United States is going to go forward with. Okay, next slide. Well, here's George Washington's Masonic apron on the left, which was a gift from his top general. So here on the apron, you can see the tree of life outlined. And with liberty, by the way, is at the top on the path of the high priestess. There's the all-seeing eye, liberty. They believed only a goddess or a female representation would have the power to lead the revolutions in both the United States, or what would become the United States, and France. Here comes the goddess Liberty. By the way, I have another, I did a YouTube on Isis, Mary, and Liberty, showing the evolution of that. It's on YouTube. Okay, so here are the levels of the tree of life and the two pillars, or three pillars, as one in the middle, on George Washington's apron. And then here's a model of the U.S. government, also based on the three pillars and the levels of the tree of life. And then with the all-seeing eye at the top, the eye of the God of ethics, which exists both outside ourselves and inside ourselves, because we're the one with the eye on our own ethics. And I want to say that these two pictures here came out of this book, Freemasonry, A Journey Through Ritual and Symbol by Kirk McNulty, MacNulty. Really a very, very interesting piece to look at. Okay, next slide. And now this is a little segue sideways into Abigail Adams. So John Adams, her husband, was the co-author of the Declaration of Independence, which was the founding document of the United States. So he's a founding father. He was the second president of the United States following George Washington. So he was born in 1735. Abigail was born in 1764. So when Abigail, when John was drafting the Declaration of Independence, Abigail sent him a letter. They were not in the same location. He was off working on this, and she sent him a letter saying, John, don't forget the ladies when you draft this document. Don't forget the ladies. Second part of that statement, which you can look it up. So these are all just suggestions. You can look this up. Don't forget the ladies, because if you do, you're going to have the biggest revolution on your hands that you have ever imagined. You think this revolution is a big revolution between the U.S. and England. You just wait if you don't include the ladies. The next part of this is John Adams said, uh-oh, make sure we do not include the word women. Do you see what I mean? They intentionally did not include the ladies because they felt that things could get out of control if the ladies had too much power. Okay, so we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator, that was a word they were using, creator, with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, and now I have here on the screen, note, for all the talk of liberty, equality, and brotherhood in the new Enlightenment era, Cotton Mather, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, and John Adams all owned slaves. So they weren't yet waking up to their own words. And John Adams was not a Freemason, and he feared that Freemasonry might become dangerous since it seemed to be redefining divine religion and God. And this could be something that would be very dangerous in the future, potentially. Okay, these fears are still going on. This is still going on. So it would take a few generations for the abolitionist movement to take hold. And maybe, another 3 generations before things really, really took hold. The words were there, but the actions were not there. And also, as we will see, Dion Fortune, who is coming up soon here, points out that the ladies in her time still continue to be relegated to cabaret. That's in the 20th century. Okay, next slide. Now we're jumping forward to Arthur Edward Waite, who many of you are familiar with from the Waite Tarot deck. So he's a master mason, 1857 to 1942, British. He was in several iterations of the Golden Dawn, and he started his own mystery school, which didn't last too long. But anyway, he started a mystery school, and he authored the tarot deck with Pamela Coleman Smith, or rather, she did the art for the deck, the famous art that we look at today. Okay, Waite was during the time where Freemasonry had swept Europe and America, and Waite's tarot contains Masonic imagery and concepts. And these are just some of the ideas that Waite was bringing forward. Heaven is the mirror of the human soul. And when we think that we are reading in the stars, it is in ourselves we read. So he was talking about the consciousness is all within us. The astronomy of man's soul is greater than that of the starry heavens. The sun represents the higher mind, the inspired part of our nature and imagination. And the sun is that eye of God, that all-seeing eye. The light of the sun signifies the influx of God into the soul. So whatever exists in the universe, Waite was saying, exists within us. And whatever we believe about the universe is coming from the inside out. Okay, next slide. And Waite questioned a lot. One of the things he questioned is, by whose authority? By whose authority does the tarot come forward? By whose authority does Kabbalah come forward, or the tree of life? And he says, by your authority. This is basically his answer, which he talks about in the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. The temple of the secret doctrine, and okay, the secret doctrine is alignment with the cosmos, the stars, and enlightenment. How can we align? Madame Blavatsky had written the book called The Secret Doctrine. How do we align with the secrets of the universe? The temple of the secret doctrine is the center of the world. The inner sanctuary is the heart of the world. The Holy Land is built forever in the heart. We are ever seeking to better build the heart through thought, through action, and through engagement with and within the mystery. And then about the holy books, he says, like for example about the Zohar and the Sefer Yetzirah that these ideas emerge from. He says this about the channeled works: the only true authority is within. And basically he was saying the people who wrote those books wrote them from within themselves. They're legitimate, but they're not the only answer because they're coming from within ourselves. He says basically there's no book that is the ultimate truth. And the later Kabbalists, quote, this is a quote from him, made it up in their own manner, providing the missing parts. But the authentic work, the truth, this is the truth, is like the Milky Way, worlds of light and nebula. He says we create it as we go. And so the tarot, the idea of the tarot is to create it as we go. By the way, the tarot had been around, tremendously around, and had been very big in Europe before the Protestant Reformation. That was before the Puritans and the Protestant Reformation. People were using the tarot in all the courts in Europe. And one example of that would have been the French court of Catherine de' Medici. And Catherine de' Medici, so I'm giving you some dates, not so that you would remember them, but just so you kind of get a feel for it. Catherine de' Medici was born in 1519, lived to 1589, and she was the Queen of France. The court philosopher, magician, diviner in Catherine de' Medici's court was Nostradamus, famous astrologer, and Mary, Queen of Scots, who would become Mary, Queen of Scots. First, she was the Queen of France, but she grew up in that court, so she was just a kid in that court. They were doing tarot and all kinds of stuff, and in fact, when she married the the Dauphin, the person who would be the King of France, a new tarot deck was created to honor their wedding, and it had them in there as characters in the tarot. So tarot was alive and well throughout Europe, but during the time of the Protestant Reformation, it became attacked as witchcraft. Yeah. See, because who has a right to use these kinds of oracles? We'll put it that way. Because with the tarot, these old tarots, when you look at the tarot decks, you see kings and queens. That's where it comes from. Queens, kings, pages. Okay, but those were real people in those tarot decks. Who's going to rise? Who's going to fall? Wheel of Fortune. Prince 1 minute, pauper the next. So, and it put too much power, working with the tarot, put too much power in and too many ideas in the hands of the young people. And so Mary, Queen of Scots, she was one of those young people who received all those ideas from the tarot. Anyway, okay. So, all right. So Mary, Queen of Scots, she was born in 1542. Paracelsus died in 1541. So they were still going on all those ideas in the courts throughout Europe. Okay, so here comes Waite in the Golden Dawn and bringing back tarot. They took a lot of risks in the Golden Dawn, and with the all the people who started bringing back the tarot, because they were actually risking being labeled witches, because it depends on which way the politics go, or whatever you want to call it. Because also in some of those versions of the Bible that were coming out, the Bible said cartomancy, which is reading cards, could be the work of the devil, or is the work of the devil. You can look it up in whatever versions of the Bible you have. I have a bunch of versions because I'm interested in all this stuff. Okay, now we're going to skip forward to somebody who is really influenced by Waite. Okay, next slide. And this is Dion Fortune. So she's born in 1890. Waite died in 1942, so they were, pretty close. So here comes Dion Fortune. And she was Welsh, English. And if I didn't mention, Waite was British. She worked with the Ascended Masters. So she's channeling through the astral field wisdom from those who once walked the planet or something like that, and now are Ascended Masters. She co-founded Society of the Inner Light. She wrote the Mystical Kabbalah, 1935. So this is recent, very recent. And here were some of her ideas. And again, I'm not trying to go through every person. I'm just pulling a few people out of history. So Dion Fortune says, it's not the form that confines life, but life that determines the form. So she's taking these ideas from Masonry and turning them even further. The mind molds the astral. So when you think of something, that it actually molds, can create a form that then can become inhabited by an actual being, or you can change the form of the actual being by thinking into it something different, molding the astral. All of this is related to the power of imagination. So this is back to Paracelsus with the power of imagination. The 10 spheres and 22 paths of the tree of life form a system of mystical psychology concerned with the soul of man. So this is the anima cosma again, and I put sick, soul of man, because even she yet wasn't using the term women or human. We were still talking about the soul of man in 1935 and the universe. Okay, so for example, in the astral triangle, the fluidic waters of chaos become organized and represented in sphere number 8. We're going to come back to this. Sphere number 8. That is the sphere of symbolization. Sphere 9 is the realm of the ether of the wise, the akasha, the astral light, and that powers the organizational process. We'll come back to this. 9 holds the mystery within the 4 elements of the material world. Okay, the 4 elements of the material world, going back again, are fire, water, air, earth. But there's a mystery with how they come together to form life. And sphere number 9 holds that mystery within it. It holds form and idea of how those 4 elements are going to swirl together. That's the tetragrammaton, and create the material world, which appears in sphere 10. But now she laments, well, maybe we don't know how to do this as well as the old ones did. And she says, all that remains to us of ceremonial practice and magic in the West is now in the hands of the church, the Masons, and the producers of cabaret. Because here is imagination, and we can actually, and this is kind of funny, but in a way it's also not, because through cabaret, and I'll throw in Hollywood and through fantasy novels and things like that, all kinds of stuff can come through. And so she says, church is about love of God, Masonry is about love of man, cabaret is about love of women. And here is the place where women can ascend and talk about what's really true, is cabaret. Okay, next slide.
Muted.
Okay, and now we come to Manly Palmer Hall, and then I'm going to be ending this like gigantic romp through history I've been on. So here comes Manly Palmer Hall, 1901 to 1990, and he wrote The Secret Teachings of All Ages. He's almost contemporary with Dion Fortune. He's just a little bit younger. She was born in 1890. He's born in 1901. And, he's a Mason. And, of course, Dion Fortune could not be a Mason because they didn't allow women into Masonry. Eastern Star, maybe. That's the women's division. But she was basically working with the ideas that the Masons were putting forth. Okay, so Manly Palmer Hall, and Manly writes, he asked the question, what are we seeking? We're seeking the soul of the world, the logos. Okay, let the cat out. My cat comes and goes. Okay. Okay, so the logos, the soul of the world. This is the anima mundi. What is the soul of consciousness? What is the soul of the world? And that is what is being called the logos. We are seeking the logos. And then he asks, he says, we are that. But of what proportion? Of what proportion of the world's soul is a man? Or the other side is, what proportion of a man is the world soul? So this is the mystery of the microcosm. which exists within each of us. So back to the microcosm, macrocosm. We live in a cosmic temple. Our body is a temple. It's temples within temples within temples. The Western Mystery School is devoted to perfecting the creation of ourselves. The Western Mystery School is Masonry and all the other branches of the Western Mystery tradition, which there are many. Okay, so Masonry teaches the science of the soul, and then he talks about Solomon. So extracting this part out of the Bible about Solomon's temple, light, glory, truth. Sol means soul. And this is like the soul of man. Solomon, light, glory, and truth, he calls it. The solar temple. Okay, the solar temple. So this is Manly Hall, the everlasting house of light. This is what we're working on. We build it by wisdom, love, and service. It's the dwelling place of the divine. We are divine. Okay, this is really fundamental core masonry now. Okay, next slide. Microcosm, macrocosm becomes the really big issue. We are a microcosm of the macrocosm of the living cosmos. In other words, we are a fragment of the universe, the living universe. We are alive as the universe is alive. Whatever exists in the universe is existing within us. We are holding it. And then the question about how much of this is within us, how much of this sort of living God, living universe, living author of everything is within us. Okay, next slide. So here's the solar logos idea. We are a fragment of the soul of the world. As we think, so we are. The world is as we think into it. We can hone our thinking. We can master our emotions. And this is all from the teachings and the stories, the mythos of the Western Mystery School, which is Freemasonry and the other branches. And they say, when you're in the schools, they say this goes all the way back to Egypt. And it goes back to Akhenaten and the idea that the sun, that we can worship the sun. We don't have to worship all the gods. We can just worship the sun. It's there every day. Just stand in the sun and catch the rays, basically. Okay. You know, a lot of this I am skimming through. And if you were doing this lecture, you might pick some different parts that you would emphasize. Okay, so, but I just want to reiterate that I'm skimming through some of these pieces of history, but you can go back and look them up. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the Western Mystery School. This is the idea. And the Tarot of the Spirit, by the way, is Western. It is flashcards of the Western Mystery School. That's what Tarot of the Spirit is. We build the temple of ourselves on the astral plane. The astral plane is alive and well in the astral triangle of the tree of life. This is the realm of living microcosm. And here we experiment with what we can and cannot change. We experiment with who we are. Okay, next slide. So the inner workings of microcosm. And, you know, so back to weight. So they were creating those tarot cards again, holding those fragments of the teachings in the tarot cards. Okay, and so here, what is in there? We activate spirit, heart, mind, and body. Those are the four elements of fire, water, air, earth. We activate intuition, empathy, sympathy in ourselves. We activate sympathetic and ceremonial magic. That magic means to do or to make. And that's the magician, that we begin to change circumstances. We don't accept everything as it is. We think into it. We feel into it. And we work the magic. We activate rituals of initiation. so that we go through changes within ourselves, levels of changes. We activate alchemy. Alchemy is the lead of ourselves into the gold of ourselves. How do we do that? We align with the stars. That's the the macrocosm in which we live. We align, we create, we build the self and the soul within ourselves. The self and the soul. And this is in Jungian terms, the microcosm, the self and the soul. We morph, we enter metamorphosis, we become a new being. This is the purpose. It's about evolution. It's about the evolution of consciousness. Things are not as they seem. This is the fundamental wisdom. We can change. We do change. We ask, what can we change? Inner and outer. We feel, we think, we become. And here I put up the serenity prayer because the wisdom is going to be to understand what we can and can't change. But for whatever we can change, we have to have the courage to go forward. We don't have to accept it as it is. Okay, next slide. The Astral Triangle, formation and metamorphosis of self, soul, and personality. What creates evolution? In a word, story. Whatever stories we tell, whatever stories we attend to is going to create the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we are. So what we attend to here is very, very important. Okay, next slide. Story thrives in the astral triangle. In all three of those spheres, 7, 8, and 9, and on all three of those paths. And it's continually moving. What we consider to be true on all three paths here, or all 6 paths, 7, 8, 9, tower, star, sun, each time one of those positions changes a bit, the whole astral triangle changes. So it's continually moving. Okay, so here comes an example. So next slide. Okay, first off, sphere 9, to address sphere 9. Okay, so sphere 9, Yesod, is called the foundation. It's actually the subconscious repository. It's the subconscious realm. And everything that happens on the entire tree of life pours down the tree of life and then lodges in sphere number 9. And it's called the sphere of self or soul. So in this sphere, self, soul, and personality are contained, but we don't even know that because it's the unconscious or the subconscious realm. We don't even know it's there most of the time. Whatever we experience lodges in the 9. The ninth sphere receives from sphere 7, and sphere 7, Netzach or victory. Sphere 7 is intuition. It's about the vision quest where we are seeking new knowledge, and it's about transmutation. And whatever travels into sphere 9 from sphere 7 comes through the path of the star. And the star is called cosmological or natural intelligence. And that's really tuning into the astral energies, the star energy. So it's about direct perception in the 7, and then traveling down the path of the star, our direct perception of the universe, and lodging in our subconscious, the 9. Okay, so on the other side, sphere 8, number 9 receives from sphere 8, which is splendor, thought, logic, and symbolization. Okay, and these forefathers or founding fathers, they were really into this idea of logic and that we can put together different kinds of stories and symbolization. The symbols are really important. So whatever we are perceiving and whatever we put together, what symbols we put together, travel on the path of the sun and land in sphere number 9. Okay, and sphere number 9 is the unconscious or the subconscious, and the sun, the path of the sun, is called the collective divine or cosmic intelligence. It's actually got two titles. One is called collective intelligence and one is called collecting intelligence. So we are collecting all this information, and then that information lives on the path of the sun. It gets illuminated, lives on the path of the sun, and influences us collectively and also influences us as individuals. Okay, all of this flows into sphere number 9, which is called the moon center, or it's the seat of the soul. This is the root of action, which is our subconscious and unconscious and or unconscious, because we're not aware of everything that's living in sphere number 9. Our consciousness is not aware of it, and yet it is the place that we act from. Okay, so next slide. Sphere 9, foundation, absorbs and integrates stories. Okay, so any stories, it could be any kind of stories. We seek something, we learn something, then we practice that, then we evolve, then we seek, we learn, practice, evolve, and it keeps going. So everything keeps changing as we learn more. So what we pay attention to matters because that's where we're seeking. Okay, next slide. Okay, so sphere 9, the power of absorption. Sphere 9 absorbs what we pay attention to. So it is the sphere of realization. It's the sphere where our vows rest and we act from there, our promises, and all these vows and promises that we make and our realizations mold our self and our soul. So what we pay attention to matters. We become that which we seek. So these pictures are just 3 different kinds of seeking and then becoming that. And we become that enterprise, whatever we pay attention to. Okay, next slide. And so here's an example of sphere 7, the seeking. So here's a meditator in sphere 7 seeking unknown knowledge. Could be anything. Whatever is going to come is going to come. And right now, he's meditating in the forest. Okay, so next slide. So now he receives a direct transmission that comes into his consciousness. And this direct transmission comes through the astral plane, you might say, and it comes from the star into his consciousness. The star is this natural cosmological intelligence. So he receives this, it flows into him, and then it's also going to flow back the other direction into his subconscious, sphere number 9. So right now he's in sphere number 7, but everything that he realizes is going to flow into his subconscious. Okay, next slide. So here's a diagram of it. So here he is seeking vision in sphere number 7. What he realizes flows down through the path of the star, which is a natural cosmological intelligence, into sphere number 9, absorption, and it changes him. His cosmic self takes root in the subconscious. So sphere number 9 here, we're seeing his cosmic self in his subconscious realm. But also what he learns travels via the path of the tower into sphere number 8. So he gets a lightning flash of illumination. And the tower is called the activating or exciting intelligence. That's where he realizes something. And then that flows into sphere number 8, the sphere of symbolization, where he has this idea. I woke up, for example. That's the path of the Buddha. I woke up. And then from then on, the self, the soul, and the persona become something totally new. The tower shifts, changes, falls, and the person becomes something new. The teachings pour over into symbolization through the path of the tower. And then in symbolization, sphere number 8, this is where all the writing takes place, trying to articulate and symbolize what happened in that vision quest of the 7. Okay, so here it comes. The eightfold path, whatever it might be. Here's the eightfold path. This is what came to me. Anyway, the Buddha spent the rest of his life trying to articulate what he experienced. Okay, and so between the sphere 8 and sphere 9, on the other side now, something else is going to take place, which I did not put the path in. That's the path of the sun. On the path of the sun, that's where the teachings start to take place in the collective society. And they appear collectively, and then that influences us. And so we see the face of those teachings, and we become influenced by that because they're shining in our culture like the sun. So the sun is whatever is shining within our culture and whatever we're receiving from that, which then in turn goes from what we are attending to or what we are reading or what we are watching, the symbolization, what we are seeing, that flows straight into our subconscious and changes us. Okay, so this starts with the idea of direct perception, natural knowing, which is called gnosis. So this person is experiencing gnosis, direct knowledge, but then that direct knowledge can flow out into both into our subconscious, into our offerings into the world, and then that can become part of the collective knowledge that also influences us and seeds the subconscious, not only of ourselves, but the subconscious of our collective subconscious or our collective unconscious that we then operate by in the world. Okay, so next slide. This is all the astral triangle. Okay, so here we go back to the star. So here are just some aspects of the star. Astral, it's astral, so it contains everything that is involved with the with that word astral and what it means. It's called the natural and cosmological intelligence. The star is about big patterns. You know, we look at the sky and we see constellations. As above, so below. The star brings up hidden influences. Again, it's the question of macrocosm and microcosm. We are seeking, is there life in the universe? So we seek outward, looking. And then we also seek to align ourself and our soul with the natural intelligence of the star. That's the cosmological intelligence. We want to be aligned. We want the star field to align within us and outside of us. And the star in the tarot is Aquarius, and Aquarius represents the cosmological human. The star is about our soulmatehood with the universe. Okay, so this actually goes all the way back to Egypt, as they say, or all the way back to, Paracelsus and some of these other people who spoke about these ideas. Okay, next slide. The path of the star, it's sphere 7 into sphere 9. So the seeker, ourselves, looks outward. We stargaze to discover. We also look inward. We take the deep dive inward in order to know better, to know ourselves. The seeker discovers that the self is cosmos. And then perceptions of the cosmos shift forever. And this is an ongoing enterprise. Okay, next slide. And we come to this point of realization. I am cosmos, forever changing. And this was one of the major ideas that the Masons and other Western mystery schools brought in the West. It was already existing in the East. Or as the Navajo like to say, for 1,000,000 years it was already existing. Okay, but the Western mystery schools began to pick up these ideas. And here's where we are today. Okay, I am the cosmos, and I am forever changing. Okay, next slide. So, the path of the tower. When we hit these realizations, it starts to break things down as we know them. Break certain things down, build certain things up. So the path of the tower goes from sphere 7 to sphere 8, from the direct knowing or gnosis, that's sphere 7, into sphere 8, symbolizing what we learned, and then back again. The seeker seeks education and new information via the path of the tower. Because, so the seeker who's in number 7 is seeking that knowledge, information, and symbolization that is created in sphere 8, seeking that through the path of the tower. Or the seeker receives new information without seeking it. It just comes, shocking us a lot of times. So new information can crack the tower open or break the tower down, and the way it is starts to shift and change. As humans, we create and inhabit a world of symbolic consciousness. We are always living according to symbols and symbolic consciousness. Information travels through the astral triangle as symbols. New symbols travel through the path of the tower from sphere 8 and then into the personal and collective, conscious and subconscious sphere 9 via the path of the sun. Okay, so what happens is if you're in sphere 7 seeking, you come up with ideas, they flow through the path of the tower, breaking certain things down and building certain things up, or making room to build certain things up. Those ideas lodge and get symbolized in sphere 8. And then once that happens, they have the power to change the collective world and reseed sphere 9 through the path of the sun. So however it shines out into the world, and however we receive that which is shining, influences our consciousness and then begins to change everything. Okay, or can change everything, seeding the world anew. Okay, so next slide. Some aspects of the tower. The known world shifts. It's always shifting. The collective or individual seeker or not, that means or not seeking, is awakened by the lightning flash of insight. The activating or exciting intelligence, that's the tower, it's called activating or exciting intelligence, raises and raises consciousness, individual and collective. The astrology on the tower card is Mars. That's about courage, change, action, and power. And when we experience this, further exploration is called for. And this further dive into the science of our lives. Like, I just put out this question, is there life on Mars? I just heard somebody last week, one of my friends was talking about the idea, I hope there's life on Mars. I watch or I hope there's evidence of life on Mars. You know, I watch all of the films coming from Mars, you know, all the video from Mars every day, and I'm looking for a human type of constructions. I really hope we came from there, you know. But anyway, is there life on Mars? Okay, and then a quote from Kathy McConnell, our beloved sister of the Holy Pen, who just wrote last week, stories are the mortar that hold the bricks of the tower together. And I love that quote so much, I had to throw it in. Okay, next slide. Okay, and now look at the sun. Okay, is the sun changeable or changeless? It's a big question. because definitely the way we are illuminated keeps changing. Okay, so the sun is astral. It's also as above, so below. As above, so below means as it is out in the cosmos, so it is within ourselves. Same as with the star. Okay, the sun is called the collective or collecting intelligence. It is the light that illuminates what we know to be true. And now I have to add, or what we think to be true. The sun unites and sustains our systems. We are sparks of the infinite, sparks of light within eternal light. All things within and without are expressions of the divine cosmos. The sun is about illumination. It's about transparency, shining a light on things, and it's about realization, spiritual realization. The sun creates fruitfulness. It can also create sterility. So, in the right measure, it's all in the right measure. And don't forget that we turn away from the sun. We turn toward the sun and we turn away from the sun as the planet to create balance. So we face the sun and then we're away from the sun. So we're holding it in balance. The path of the sun is the passage from self-consciousness, sphere number 8. That's where we become self-conscious and we create the symbols, to subconsciousness, sphere number 9, the foundation of the astral triangle and the foundation of our actions, and back again. So the path of the sun goes from 8 to 9 to 8 to 9 to 8 to 9 and keeps changing and shimmering, at least in our perception, as it gets seeded by new knowledge and information. We are illuminated by the sun. We can also be burnt by it or blinded by it. So we need all of the different aspects working together to come into deep understanding of ourselves and who we are. Okay, next slide. And the sun symbol, okay, this is Masonic or Western Mystery School. The sun symbol has been used to represent supreme intelligence. Is there supreme intelligence in the cosmos? And is this supreme intelligence subject to change? I mean, our view of it changes if it is there. Okay, it's called the all-seeing eye. So in Masonry, the sun represents the light, the supreme intelligence. And the goal in Masonry is to rebuild the body temple to reflect the radiance of the greatest light and to fill that temple with light. Okay, that's from Harold Waldman Percival, Masonry and its Symbols. Okay, encapsulation of Masonry and its symbols. The sun is the collective and collecting intelligence. The collective intelligence concentrates all modes of consciousness that have been before and combines them into a new form. The sun holds all that. This creates a new personality for us in the astral triangle. The collecting intelligence refers to the intelligence of assembling, bringing together, unifying, embodying, and synthesizing. The sun represents what we see, what we attend to, what we pay attention to, what is shining on us, and what is shining from us. They call the sun the face of the Lord. Oh, this is from Paul Case. Paul Case is another Western Mystery School teacher. This one is out of the Book of Tokens by Paul Case, the Book of Tokens. Paul Foster Case. The sun is the face of the Lord, which is, O seeker for light, the face of thine own true self. Paul Foster Case, Mason. Okay, so this is some of the Masonic information. Paul Case also did a tarot deck. Lots of these people have created tarot decks. And this one's Oddfellow's symbolic art with the all-seeing eye there. Friendship, love, and truth is the motto, the 3 links of the chain. And then we all work together. This is the idea. We hold our heart in our hand. I'm going to help you. That's a virtue and a value that is put forth as the most important thing. I will help you. Okay, this goes back to Benjamin Franklin. What virtues will we live by? What values will we live by? We can create that. Okay, we're part of a hive, and here is a symbol of a beehive. We are in it together. Oh, I mentioned before, there's a bundle of sticks that appears on the Weight Tarot deck. It's on the lower right side of the card. Here's a bundle of sticks. You know, each stick alone isn't too strong. You can break it in half, but put us together, we can be really strong. Okay, who do you want to align with? All those questions. Okay, next slide. So the star and the sun work together in the astral triangle. The star is about direct knowing of cosmological intelligence, gnosis, and then bringing that into our science of ourselves. It's Aquarius, our science of ourselves and our future. The sun, collective, illuminated cosmological intelligence. And yeah, so the sun, in Hebrew, the sun is called Resh, R-E-S-H, and it means face. It's like what we see, what is on the face of it, and then what are we putting out? How are we seeing? Cosmological means the story of how things come to be. Question for us, what story or cosmology will we ascribe to? That's the key question. Okay, next slide. Story. I'm into storytelling. Okay, the power of story. The learner who is the knower of the field. That's out of the Bhagavad Gita. The learner, the knower of the field, seeds consciousness, consciously and unconsciously. Because what we think, do, and say matters, even if we don't know we're doing it. If we're not aware of it, it still matters because it influences people. Okay, Sphere 8, symbolization, flows into Sphere 9, absorption, and back again. We symbolize, we absorb, and we symbolize. Sphere 7, vision quest, transmutation, flows into Sphere 9, absorption, and back again. 7 to 9 and back. That's the path of the star. From Sphere 8, symbols radiate as and into symbolic consciousness. These symbols flow into the individual and collective consciousness and subconscious. The astral triangle then shimmers with information and creation and change. Rules are created around what is allowed to be revealed, because the path of the sun is about revelation, revealing and concealing. Rules are created around what is allowed to be revealed and by whom. And it is always said in the Western Mystery School, human law is not cosmic law. Just something to think about. Okay, next slide. Okay, revisit Astral Triangle 7, 8, and 9. The Astral Triangle shimmers with the power of story, and every single path on the Astral Triangle, the 7, the 8, the 9, the tower, the star, and the sun, they're always changing. Okay, all of the paths are always changing.
Got a basket.
Okay, next slide.
Oh, you guys made strawberries.
Oh, we need to mute someone.
Beautiful. Those are nice. You getting some cheese?
Could everybody mute?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so here's another vision of the astral triangle. So we've got 7, 8, and 9. And then I put in these symbols. Since we're on symbols, I put in symbols to represent the astral triangle, the tower, the star, and the sun. Okay, so we have a tarot card number 7. That's the card of seeking the new earth, the garden. Then we have 8, power of symbolization. How are we going to know? How are we going to know? As soon as we know what we're finding on the path of seeking, then we can code it. In the 8, code it. We code it as, this is the power shield, number 8. We code it as our truth, our deep truth, our deep love, and the courage of our convictions. So we code it in the tarot cards that are all number 8s. We find it in the 7s, we code it in the 8s, and then it flows down into the 9 and gets lodged in the subconscious realm, which holds our experience. So all 4 9s in the tarot are ways we hold our experience without necessarily realizing it. The 9 of fire, and this one is like seeing a much bigger spiritual picture. 9 of water, this one's about seeing a much bigger picture of love. 9 of wind, this one is where trauma gets held. The intellect, because the intellect, surprisingly, as they say in the mystery school, has more potential of going wrong as we rationalize things than any of the other suits. Fire is more clear, more pure. Water, which is our emotions, more clear, more pure. Earth, more clear, more pure. This high form of earth. But in the intellect, we can rationalize our actions. We are capable of producing and reproducing a social order that denies our very soul. And this 9 of wind card gives us a chance to look at that and begin to unscramble that. So that's what it means. Like, what trauma have you experienced if that card comes up, and how are you holding it in the subconscious? So this gives us a way of moving out of that once we realize it. Okay, next slide. Okay, what have we experienced? How are we holding that consciously and subconsciously? So I'm calling, just for our purposes today, I'm calling number 9, the sphere that is our foundation. I'm calling it the hold. Okay, just for your information, and so you can start to think about it this way. What are we holding? Why are we holding it? Okay, next card. Okay. Based on the configuration of and in the hold, we walk the subconscious into the world. We don't even realize what we are walking into the world. So this is 9 into 10. So whatever we're absorbing, sphere number 9, is what we're going to radiate out in sphere 10. And the path that connects 9 and 10 is the universe. All possibility is at hand. All possibility. So if we're holding a lot of trauma in the 9, it is very likely that we are going to project that out into the world in some way. Okay, so just to give you an idea of how this tree of life is fitting together. Okay, 9 flows into 10 also. So the astral triangle, all of it comes into the 9, and then we walk that straight out into the world. Okay, next slide. Oh, I wanted to tell you a little story about myself. That's me there in sphere 7. That's me seeking. So our own seeking can change us. It can make us crazy. Okay, so here's me. I need to go into the seminary. I need to study in the seminary. Okay, so what do I study in the seminary? I spend 5 years studying the religions of the world, the major religions of the world. I study indigenous spirituality to quite a depth. I study Madame Blavatsky, Manly Hall, Masonic symbolism, Eastern, Western, and indigenous thought, right? I mean, it was a lot. It was huge, studying world philosophy and religion, right? So, and when I first started in the seminary, I really, plus I'd already, had an education in sociology before I even started that. Sociology and psychology, and then I go into spirituality. Okay, when I first started in the seminary, I believed in the 10-point belief system that the seminary had and was based on. So I thought it was really good. And I thought, yeah, I can do this thing, you know. So, and just for example, one of the points on the 10-point belief system was a quote from Jesus that said, all these things I have done, you can and will do and more. And I thought, yeah, that I get that. You know, I'm down with that. Okay. I still think that's really good. But there were other things on there that from the exact studies I went through, I can no longer agree with the 10-point belief system. If I hadn't gone through the studies, I would have still liked the 10-point belief system. But because I went through the studies, it propelled my consciousness into a much wider, I had a very large consciousness when I came out. So I hit a crisis when I came up for ordination, which was I can't be ordained because I don't believe in it. Sorry, I don't believe in it any longer. Okay, what happened was that went to I went to the ordination anyway. So the ordination was in Pennsylvania. I had to go talk to my teacher. So it's in Pennsylvania, Wyalusing, the Wyalusing Rocks, you know, 1,000 feet over the Susquehanna River. I mean, very, very dramatic. And in which moment I also met with the chief of the Eastern Delaware tribe, and then I was to be ordained the next day. And you know, I couldn't do it. Okay, so crisis. What happens if you dedicate a lot of time to something and then it no longer works? So this is what we do to ourselves. Okay, next slide. Okay, and I'm asking myself, yeah, what are you walking into the world? Oh, by the way, Tarot of the Spirit was already done. It was published, it was already out. This is 1993 when I came up for ordination. And I mean, I basically had the Tarot in my back pocket, and I was really deep into the Western mystery tradition. Okay, if we are not satisfied, what can we do? Well, we can go back into the astral triangle and reconsider and rearrange our thoughts and emotions. As the Freemasons of old said, the world is as we think into it. So the question is, what do we want to think into it? Our task is to think and rethink. And I know this sounds tedious. It does sound tedious, but we have to learn that we're living inside a process. That's part of the big deal. And move with the process and trust our intuition inside the process. So the rule of thumb is, in fact, things will always be building up and breaking down. So the only thing that is certain is change. And so to know that we ourselves are also always changing. So how are we going to work with that? How are we going to live with that? Okay, next slide. So those are the big questions. Okay, what we have to do then is revisit the power of story. Rethink the astral triangle, this shimmering temple of self and soul. And how can we do this? Okay, so we can travel back up the tree into the ethical triangle. And in that ethical triangle, we can begin to rework our ethical system. That's what Benjamin Franklin was doing. He was working with this ethical system where we re-examine our sense of right and wrong, good and bad, by reconsidering the cosmological story by which we live, the story that inhabits the supernal or cosmological triangle. So what we have to do is we have to go even further in, deeper in. And this could be deep inside ourselves, or it could be up or out, however you want to look at it, reconsidering the cosmological stories we tell ourselves. And when we go deeply into what we believe is true about our cosmos and ourselves, then we can travel back down, rework our ethical systems, and then those ethical systems are going to lodge in the stories we tell that influence the astral triangle and create basically our personality and how we're walking in the world. So we may have to travel the path of temperance to to perceive a new story. And the path of temperance connects the 6 and the 9. So the path of temperance can take us straight out of the astral triangle and back up the tree into the ethical triangle. Well, what's the path of temperance? The path of temperance is the desert way. It's where we go on a really deep retreat within ourselves to try to rebalance. That's where we go to the desert on the horse with no name. And we stay in the desert till we figure it out. But what it's going to take us into is our perceptions of the cosmos. How is the cosmos configured? Okay, this isn't for everybody. I'm realizing this lecture is not for everybody. This lecture is for people who are willing to take the deep dive. Okay, you are the walking tree of life. You. How are you going to walk your walk? Okay, the most important thing is you walk your walk with integrity and know that it is going to change and it is going to shift. Okay, next slide. Okay. The astral triangle shimmers with continuous change. I think I made that point several times. And the key is, because it's always changing, at your core, what do you value? What is your own deep ethical system? What virtues will you live by, and practice that every single day? And here I quoted one of my favorite people, Luz Esteban Preciado, 1948 to 2017, my son's baseball coach. He was also a fireman and a chimney sweep. And Luz said, "There is no such thing as a perfect game, period. Something's always going to go wrong, just know it. But there is such a thing as perfect practice. You show up, you practice, you try to get it right, you practice every day, and then in the game, expect things to go wrong and you do the best you can." That's loose. Okay, next slide. Okay. By the way, friend, this is me writing. My teacher laughed at me. "Of course you will be ordained," she said. "You are the future. The whole universe, all the stars and galaxies live inside your cape of ordination. That's why it feels heavy, not as you expected." Okay, she said, you expect it to feel light. No, because you're taking on these deep problems. Okay, it's heavy. It's a lot, and it isn't as you expected. She said, "I would be just like you and with you all the way, but I'm too old in this incarnation. So you're going to have to carry the seminary forward with the new cosmology." And that's basically what I have done, and what I've continued to do is develop this new cosmology, visionary cosmology, take the tree of life, keep moving it forward. And as I've said many times, they call it the living tree of life. It's alive, it's you, it's living. There's no fixed knowledge. There's a fixed format and diagram, but the knowledge within is always changing. Okay, next slide. Okay, and I found this picture of somebody hitchhiking down the road in that same hood, kind of looked like me. And I wrote, "You're the radiant tree of life walking." Okay, next slide. Or hitching a ride through the galaxy. Okay, next slide. Okay, and then here's a reading, and we're going to come back to this reading based on the astral triangle, and it shows how we can put a reading together and stand inside this moving power of story. But let's go to the next slide. Okay, and I want to say that this lecture today is dedicated to Sarah Jane Kilburn Stewart, who is my great-grandmother. She lived from 1869 to 1959. So she was Eastern Star / Mason, That's the women's division. She was a suffragist and a proponent of women's rights for all women. Big time uh, feminist. My grandmother, her daughter, said she was the first women's libber. My grandmother wasn't too thrilled about her outspoken nature. Anyway, so Sarah Jane, she was a representative at the National Eastern Star Conference in Chicago in 1907. All women's lodges are installed at this conference. This was a historic action. So her philosophy would have been, she loved cabaret, boy. She knew that, she loved that, and she was a Westerner, and she hung with the Native Americans. She did the ghost dance. Cabaret is one way, organizing is another. Eastern Star was all about organizing, and at this conference they brought in all the women from the entire country, and I say all women, but I'm mainly, what they were mainly talking about was no discrimination on the basis of race, ethnicity, or any other factors. And what we're going to do is we're going to raise the women up, and she was fighting for the vote. And you remember that they got the vote in 1920. This is how long this whole thing took from the beginning for women, all women, to be recognized. So cabaret is one way, organizing is another. And this is me hitchhiking, and I say, because she's talking to me a lot now, so I say, hey, Sade. Oh, they called her Sade. Hey, Sade, thanks for giving me a lift. And she says back at me, you can do it, Buzzy. And that was her line. And I wonder now if she was actually referring to the beehive when she said, you can do it, Buzzy. So when I think I can't do it, which happens a lot, I hear my great grandmother saying, you can do it, Buzzy. All right, we'll do it. We can do it together. Okay, next slide. And so I say, thanks for giving me a lift, Sade. And there she is in her wagon. Okay. So for more information, Tarot of the Spirit book and cards, Kabbalah and Tarot of the Spirit. And you can check out the other YouTubes too. Check out Isis, Mary, and Liberty to learn more about the whole situation with those founding fathers and how they brought in the goddess and the divine feminine. So they were working on it. All right, so we will end now, and we'll see you next time. Okay, bless, bless, bless.